Welcome to this episode of Weather Wise Guys. I'm meteorologist Wes Peary here with meteorologist Evan Chickfera. Evan, tell us about yourself real quick. I mean, we always have new people watching. Just who are you?
Well, first off, we're wise guys. I think we sometimes are wise with weather, but not always. Kind of an ironic title, but meteorologist here in Birmingham, coming up almost to the day on 10 years in Alabama. So we're just having fun. We here we got snow twice in like a week and a half. We've had some crazy cold, so we're just having a blast over here. But love what I do, and I love that we get to talk weather, just discuss what's happening across the country. We graduated together 2014, so we thought we'd launch this little segment that we do every week on Mondays. So you're watching this at a later date. We do some currents and some forecasting, but we also look ahead to the week and some notable stuff.
Yeah, we try to teach you something as well, and it's always fun. Evan and I went to college together. I've lived in Missouri. I went from Springfield, Missouri to Atlanta to Kansas City, Missouri. So I don't know what my total, like 7 years in Missouri. We're both statesmen. Evan more of a statesman than I am, if he's been in Alabama for 10 years.
Yeah, Dothan for 6, Birmingham for 4.
Nice. Well, we're both meteorologists, and we both are just doing this podcast in order to kind of put out some non-hyperbolic forecast information. And it's really easy to actually not hype up this current weather pattern because it's kind of just so ridiculous that we just makes it easy to talk about it.
It's doing it itself. I mean, you start talking about snow down to Pensacola. I mean, everyone here, I'm sure, has taken a vacation to Pensacola. Go to the beach. You can go there in December and it's warm. And they could get almost 2 inches of snow. It's just wild. So we don't have to hype anything up. It's just kind of happening.
Yeah, and that would actually be awesome to see the Gulf of Mexico, like the white sand beach with white snow. That's like some
I would
dreams and or nightmares. I made up that for some.
Depending on who you are.
Okay, so we're going to get into just how cold it is, who's experiencing this cold, when the worst of it will be happening. There's winter weather all over the place. Evan and I were just discussing the chance of maybe 6 inches of snow. Maybe not in the white sandy part of the Gulf of Mexico, but still along the Gulf. And then Evan and I are going to prop ourselves up here a little bit. As we tell you what the toughest cities to forecast are, why they're so tough, why the weather in America is so ridiculous and tough. In fact, my wife actually asked me a question the other day. She goes, do tornadoes only happen in America? And I immediately said, are you just asking that because you're trying to be interested in my job? She said, no, I'm actually curious. And I was like, well, I have just the answer for you.
Sit down. Let's talk about it. You got 10 minutes?
That's right. Listen to my podcast, honey. We got 30 minutes.
You're going to learn something. You'll probably realize maybe what it's a little bit like to be a meteorologist. I feel like that's a big thing too here. We try to explain, the easiest thing. I heard last week, and I texted you, Wes, as soon as I heard. I'm listening to National Sports Talk Radio, and they're talking about how the only time a meteorologist gets it right is yesterday's forecast. I'm like, oh, come on.
That's pretty good. I at least once a year I get the only job that gets paid to be wrong.
Of course, you just steer into it. I'm like, well, I guess I picked something smarter because there we go, still direct deposited.
You said you messed up, buddy. Like you do something wrong with your job, you get fired. I missed the forecast. I'm still getting paid. Sorry.
I will say snow made it a little bit tougher. It certainly did. So,
speaking of snow, we'll get into that with the forecast contest that Evan and I are into. So I haven't really figured out a forecast contest punishment, but
we should do a punishment, and it should be on like I don't know how many weeks we need to do, but whoever has the better record after like 5 weeks,
yeah,
the other's got to take a pie to the face or something.
I would like that. That sounds good. Of like a regional pie. Like if I lose, like a Frito pie to the face, like barbecue and chili,
and then, hopefully not hot.
Ouch. Depends on how damaging we want it to be. And then if you lose, what's an Alabama pie?
Well, I don't want to insult anyone here who's in Alabama, but we do have the peach capital of Alabama, which is Chilton County. They do peaches, peach pie. Of course, lemon meringue pie is always popular, but I think the lemon might burn the face. So, we'll see about that. Leave a suggestion if you're happening to watch this. Drop down below. What
Yeah,
do you want to see the loser have to do? It's entertaining.
that's a good idea. Okay, let's take a look what's going on right now. We're recording this around noon on Monday, January 20th, and just a gigantic trough, which is a big old dip. I think of troughs as in like an animal feeding trough. They have to dip their head down to eat out of their trough, and so the cold air has dipped all the way across the country. Kind of a westerly wind, which for us, Evan, westerly is actually a warmer wind direction, but in this case, not so much.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, you got a little bit of snow there in Kansas, and honestly, this map is very quiet. You wouldn't know that we're about to see a winter storm in the southeast, but we are.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. In fact, let's see. Let's watch this winter storm because there really isn't like a gigantic system um, coming up out of the Gulf of Mexico. Like nothing super glaring. It's more or less moisture coming up, meeting with the really cold air in place. And here you go, Houston, all across the southeast there from Tuesday into Wednesday. Let me back that up real quick so we can kind of break down a little more granularly. And Evan, I'm going to defer to you because this winter weather is more impacting your region than my region. But look at that, Houston at 7 a.m. It is snowing heavily.
That's heavy snow. Yeah.
Then we go into South Louisiana, Mississippi, and then Birmingham. Some snow on Tuesday afternoon. What's up with that?
Looks like we're going to see some. I think what we'll get here is more very light snow. There's just not a lot of moisture, and that's the thing that we've been kind of going back and forth with here, Wes, is we have a strong northerly flow, right? It's coming from a really dry air mass. Our dew points are so low, our atmospheric moisture is so low. That's really the thing that's missing. Whereas this moisture coming in from the Gulf, there's enough of it in the southern half of the state to get some sort of precip, and it just happens to be cold enough there. So that's where the ingredients line up. Here in central Alabama, there's just a lack of moisture, and that's the biggest issue with moving forward as far as getting snow totals. People want it here. We have everything. Everything's lined up. Just the moisture's not going to quite be far enough north to give us a nice, beautiful, beautiful snowfall.
And you can kind of see like this cutoff line of the darker blues. I guess down here is where they're expecting to have more snow.
Yep, that's your bullseye. I got 2.2 for Mobile off the NDFD data. I got 1.9 in Pensacola. Gulfport's in that 1 to 1.5 inch range, all in that area, which it's just so weird to see those snow totals down in Louisiana, you're on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah. And then we go over, I mean, snow. Yeah, there's Pensacola right there. See if we can get to pop up on the map. But I mean, yeah, there's the Panhandle, Tallahassee, all that going into Jacksonville.
How about freezing rain and sleet for the northern part of the Florida Peninsula? I mean, I don't know when that's happened. I know a meteorologist who forecasts in Gainesville, and he was texting me over the weekend, said, we have the potential for freezing rain in the DMA, into the North Florida Peninsula. And I mean, that's hard to get cold air and moisture lining up down there. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I wonder if like freezing rain is more not more frequent, but it's more likely to happen in Florida because you usually get the shallow layer of cold air coming in versus the one that kind of cools off the entire column of the atmosphere to give you all of snow.
That's a good question. I would imagine you're probably right. It's probably easier to get the surface temperature down to 28, 32 than it is to have the entire column of the atmosphere freezing that far south.
Yeah. So we'll get into temperatures now. This is the wind chill. It's going into the afternoon. This afternoon looks like maybe single digits here in Kansas City, down in Birmingham, Atlanta, Memphis, about 20. Does that seem about right? What you guys are experiencing?
Yep. So our high today is supposed to be 30, but our wind chill factors keep us 17 to 22 all day.
And then Tuesday morning will be the coldest kind of say morning of this situation because really it's tonight too, a Monday night and Tuesday morning here in Kansas City where it'll be like negative 15 to negative 20 for hours. Looks like Birmingham's closer to kind of the positive side, positive 15 or so.
Yeah, get out the shorts.
Woo! Woo! And then let's just go. Wednesday, we're getting warmer. In fact, look at that. Wednesday evening, we're feeling the same. Kansas City, Birmingham, Memphis,
Heat
all
wave.
we feel like a 20 heat wave for us. And then we'll try to get into the 40s here Friday afternoon, 20s in Kansas City, 40s in Atlanta, 50s back into Houston. So that's a little bit more of the regular weather for them. And let's see how far we get on this weather model before another cold front tries to come through here. And then, oh, let me back up, get a little bit of warmth. Do we get some warmth here in Birmingham Saturday?
We are much closer to Climo beyond the weekend. I've got highs right around 50 both Saturday and Sunday, and then rain, like a cold rain on Sunday.
Okay.
But our Climo this time of year, we should be around 54, 55 with a low in the mid 30s, and we've been below that. In fact, we are since 1980, we've had some of the coldest average low temperatures in Birmingham. I think we ranked fifth since 1980, 2014, 2003, 2000, and I believe 1980 itself or 84 are the only years where our January average low has been colder than so far this year. And if you take into account today and the next couple of days, it's probably going to be higher than that. But that's when I looked last, and pretty cold.
Oh, yeah. And then coming back Sunday, this is when we have the AFC Championship game here in Kansas City.
Go
And again,
Chiefs.
these are the wind chill values. 20, I always lean more toward 25. I mean, 2025 compared to the 10 it was last game. It's really not that bad. It's looking to be much better. So there's plenty of cold air in place, Evan, and it looks like you guys are just out of the winter storm watch, just south of
Yes.
you.
So that's still our DMA, those southernmost counties. I think we've got about 5 or 6 in there on the very fringe of that winter storm watch. And what they're calling for here, our National Weather Service office, is right around an inch maximum accumulation in those counties. And for us, that's a big deal. We're right on the periphery of those higher snowfall totals, just to the south of us here. And really, I think we kind of get lucky. Yeah, that's the graphic I actually have here, and it
Hey.
just shows for us at Birmingham, it's like trace amounts. For those
Yeah.
lighter areas, it's about 0.2 of an inch to 0.3 of an inch. And I think the snow is going to be falling, but it's going to almost be like flurries, where you've been around in flurries. I mean, it's blowing around. It doesn't really stick. It's not coming down heavy enough to accumulate. So there could be some minor issues. And if we see a surge in moisture where it's like higher, maybe. But a lot of kids bummed. Some parents probably excited. I know. I don't necessarily want to be stuck here, so it's kind of nice that we don't have those impacts. So, but yeah,
Check out this
Whew.
this fat swath right here, south of
Look at that.
Houston, 4 to 8, 4 to 8. This whole blue area is essentially 4 to 8. I mean, New Orleans, yeah, 4 to 8. Mobile, 2 to 4. South of Montgomery, 1 to 2. Alexandria, 1 to 2. Um, it's gonna be really interesting to see how this forecast pans out because down here, I feel like these forecasters are much more used to doing severe weather or doing hurricanes, and it's like, all right, let's see how good they can do this with winter weather, and vice versa. If a hurricane comes up to Missouri, we're like, hey, we don't really deal with this. So
Yeah, it's very regional. I think I said this on a previous episode that we did. I'm very comfortable with severe weather. I can look at that. And you are too, because you guys get that severe weather season. But with the winter weather, we kind of you got to revert back to experience with a lot of events, right? And since we don't experience them, we can't think back to okay, this time last year, what happened in this setup, or last week, or whenever it was. The snowfall that we usually have is it's been 10 years since or 5 years since, and you look back and you pull up surface charts of the setup and you try to compare that, but it's so
Mhm.
few and far between. The models will say some things, but they're all over the map, and so we really take it day by day. We look at the probabilistic outlooks a lot, and then as we get closer, we can kind of narrow it down.
And speaking of the probabilistic outlook, so let's go. Here we go. This is the chance of getting at least 1 inch of snow. So Houston, Galveston, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and it's all
Guaranteed.
there. We
Yeah.
do we didn't talk too much about the Panhandle, about their snowfall totals, but again, so you good than 1 inch of snow. Birmingham, slim chances there. So you kind of just work your way up. You're like, okay, there's 1 inch of snow down there, pretty good. So how about 3 or more inches of snow?
Mm.
And same thing down near New Orleans. Red here is 90% or greater. So just crazy that they're. I mean, we're over water here, so it's not going to really. You're not going to
Um,
tell. But that's crazy. Three.
Imagine these little parishes on the Louisiana coast that have maybe not seen snow, people who live there in their lifetime, and they're going to see this, which could be a once in a lifetime, event. I had some people in Dothan reach out to me this morning and ask me, "Hey, what should I take off of work and experience this with my kids?" I said, if you can swing it, I don't know the next time we'll get 1 to 2 inches down there. So
I don't know if many places are going to be requiring you to go to work with this amount of much of snow.
a lot of that part of the state shut down. So
So look at Houston, south side of Houston into Galveston, right? That's a big beach area right here. You can see the Barrier Islands. So a 90% chance of getting more than 3 inches. So that's, to me, that says, all right, you're getting 3 to 6. And I think down here was the forecast for 4 to 8.
yep.
So this whole thing, 4 to 8. Then once you get into the Panhandle, Panama City, this is more of like this is a 50-50 shot. But this is the spot that I would love to see the most, Evan. Like PCB, Pensacola, like when you think of the white sand beaches, that's what I go to. That's what my head goes to. It's so to see a layer of white sand underneath a layer of snow, dream for me.
It would just be, well, and I'm sure I'll get pictures. Our viewers are really good at sending pictures really from all over the state, all the way down to Florida. So, I mean, that would just be an incredible sight to see. Just weird to see that the bullseye is to the south. Again, it's so backwards.
So I'm going to, for fun here, I'm turning on the chance of getting more than 6 inches of snow. So ignore the 3 inches of snow banner. I changed it to 6 inches of snow, and so we're at probably 10, 20. So like a 25% chance of getting more than 6 inches down here right along the coast. And I would assume that we're getting these very high snowfall values because, I mean, you have a really good gradient, a really good temperature contrast here. So it's almost like a little stationary front is showing up along the Gulf of Mexico and the coast. And so when you get a stationary front, you get a lot of really good lift. And there's also a ton of moisture because your moisture source is literally right there. And so it's a nice little mesoscale feature to just get the most snow possible in a very unusual spot.
Yeah, that's a great point because this is an unusual cold. So as you mentioned, that trough, the polar vortex, as we call it, is so far south. And I mentioned earlier, our lack of moisture is what's killing us. Well, you have a sweet spot, a mesoscale feature, like you just said, Wes, where there's that overlap. You got the Gulf, so you have plenty of moisture, and the cold air just happens to get far enough south and just, a once in several decades occurrence there.
Yeah, and here's evidence is talking about the polar vortex, and it's getting stretched out. You can kind of make it out right here over the GFS. Because I had to record an explainer for my TV station yesterday, and the polar vortex is something that at times is really difficult to kind of figure out and see what it's doing. In this instance, they're saying the polar vortex is being stretched out, and the polar vortex is something that happens in the stratosphere, but there's a manifestation of it, a very cold air underneath it in the troposphere where our weather is. And so the polar vortex you can kind of make out is getting stretched in this giant oval shape, and the cold air in the lower part just come with it. And you can kind of just make out that this white line, maybe from Montreal to near Chicago, that's probably the polar vortex itself. And then the really cold air just kind of oozes down south with it. And that's why you get those light blues, and it's all the way along the Gulf Coast. In fact, Evan, do you want to briefly talk about the polar vortex, like the stable, when it's in a stable phase and when it's kind of in this disruptive phase?
Sure, I'd love to. I did an explainer on this as well to explain to people because you hear polar vortex, and I think a lot of people hear vortex, and you think of a tornado. A lot of our viewers do. But, vortex is just, circular motion within either a fluid or in this case, the atmosphere. And it's always there. We know at the poles is where the coldest air is. And it's the coldest, obviously, during this time of year when we've got our hemisphere's winter. So when everything's stable and we have a zonal flow, meaning there's no crazy troughs, no crazy ridges, everything's going from west to east like it's supposed to, normal traffic flow, that cold air stays confined. Obviously, you got the coldest air over the pole itself, but when there's a disruption like what we've had, our winters look like this, man. Where really the only ridging has been over the western United States, and even at times there's been a massive trough. So when you have this disturbance, it allows that Arctic air to just spill south. And it's pretty common, I feel like, for the Great Lakes, New England especially, to get it. But for us to have it this many times with this level of cold, it's been an interesting winter so far. And when you get a feature like a high or a low even over the Aleutians there, and it just changes that wind flow, and it's like when you deviate traffic, right? You close a couple lanes, everything's got to go up and around. This is changing the flow of traffic in the atmosphere, and thus our pattern. So
Blocking. There's a traffic jam. Traffic
yep,
blocking,
big old block.
if you will. Um, and so obviously it's very cold across the country. And something that was kind of ironic, Evan, the last couple of mornings, the wind chill has been -10. Uh, my area has not been underneath a cold weather advisory. And first off, let's start by addressing what a cold weather advisory is, an extreme cold warning. These used to be called wind chill advisories, wind chill warnings, but um, I think what they had two different products are the exact same. So an extreme cold warning has always existed. So has a wind chill warning, but they just decided, the National Weather Service just decided to combine them into one and drop the whole wind chill situation. Uh, but it's just funny. It's like been -10 in my town for the last 2 days, but we weren't in a cold weather advisory. But now that it gets to -15, then we've hit the magic threshold here. It's like, okay, now it's cold enough to be a cold weather advisory.
Do you have -60 to -25 up there in
Yeah, dude.
Montana?
That's what it is up here. That's what the forecast is up here across Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Like, what a range. -25 to -60.
I mean, and with all these, everyone, we get a lot of comments here. So all my family's from Michigan, right? I've lived in the South my whole life. We get heat waves that are of a high magnitude. We get severe weather that is not common there. Everywhere's like got their own unique geographic feature. We do not necessarily have the infrastructure. A lot of people don't necessarily have central heating. So when it gets down to zero for a wind chill, which is what we had this morning, we had that extreme cold warning. But our parameters are different because down here, extreme cold is 0 to 5 with temperatures in the teens. That's extreme cold to us. To you in Kansas City, even, that's pretty normal. I mean, as you saw last week, 2 weeks ago, you saw that several times. Down here, we don't typically get that. So it's definitely relative to the forecast area.
I think that the infrastructure thing is a really important piece of that because, like, yes, it gets cold in Kansas City, in Omaha, and in Minneapolis, but and yes, like even Atlanta, people have heaters, they have air conditioning. But in terms of how the homes are built with maybe thickness of insulation is really important for like society's ability to keep up with the cold weather conditions and having cold weather plans to help people out that are homeless or just don't have AC and heating. It's not quite as widespread. Like if you get an old home, let's say in Alabama, there may not have like very up to date heating system, right? But it'll be the reverse up in Minnesota, where it's like they definitely have a heating system, but they'll just open up their windows. Over in California, my brother who's lived in San Diego, Los Angeles, he has very rarely ever had a AC or a heater. I remember I visited him a few years ago, and it was like really cold, and we had to turn on the oven to heat his
Oven.
place up.
I know here, especially in Alabama, there's a large amount of manufactured homes or trailers,
Yeah.
however you want to look at it. And the problem with a lot of those is air can get underneath those very easily. And so you run into situations where the pipes will freeze. So that's usually a pretty big issue. And then sadly, Wes, we have a ton of people here who they rely on space heaters. Well, space heaters have their own safety concerns. And we've had several house fires here in Alabama that have been basically blamed on space heaters or them malfunctioning or a power surge. So, it's definitely infrastructure plays a role.
Then we'll quickly, I think, touch on this where the inauguration, which is today, I believe, as we're talking about it,
It
again,
looks
moved
cold.
inside, and that's because they're underneath a cold weather advisory until 9 a.m. tomorrow. So it's cold all over the place. And again, just because like these locations aren't in a cold weather advisory doesn't mean it's not cold there. It's just technically not cold enough for them to be considered.
It's cold everywhere.
Yeah, it's freaking
So I
cold
said this
everywhere.
morning, don't get caught up in it's cold everywhere.
Okay, so our weather, we talked about how unusual it is to be cold and hot. Um, some places really just don't see a big change in the temperature overall. I recently gave a talk at the downtown Kansas City Library. This was an unusual age crowd for me, Evan. Because usually, and I know you do the same thing. You go to schools, talk to teachers, you talk to kids. It's very
Yeah, it's a
very
big.
fun and
It's
interactive.
a nice, fun part of the job. So
Yeah. No, I was talking to like grandparents, or like just a lot of like retirees or people
I've
that
been to
are
Rotary clubs. That's what
okay.
Rotary clubs are. Yeah, good
I,
folks.
I mean, they definitely show an interest. Like if you do a school talk, depending on the age, some of these kids just don't care. Like, which is fine. That's how it is. But one thing that I was talking about, since my topic was wild Midwest weather, but I started to add some things in here for Birmingham. And so your weather, your climate is very much controlled by Evan, let's see if we both remember this. I'll say one of them and you say the other. Your proximity to water.
And latitude and
Yeah.
altitude,
Yeah.
right?
And so also the temperature of the water that you're at. So what I did is I found the hottest and the coldest parts of the year, their average high temperature, and found out what the difference was. San Diego, cold water, very little change in their average high temperature from the hottest part of the year to the coldest part of the year. Miami, a little bit different because I think like warm water maybe has slightly less control, or maybe I don't know. Miami it rains more often, so you can get a bigger change in average temperature on some days if it rains in the afternoon.
I think too you have a difference in air masses there. You've got a tropical air mass in Miami, and that there's always water present in the air. It's a lot harder to have temperature swings when you got a lot of water in the air. So, in Miami, you can have very minimal change like year round with the warm Gulf. I mean, the Gulf's cool now, but relatively speaking, the Gulf Stream runs right next to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a reason for that. And I've been to San Diego, absolutely beautiful, but much cooler. You get that cold water in the Pacific right there. So
So now what I did is I used AI. I said, hey, what's the city that is furthest away? The city in America that is the furthest away from any ocean, any coast, and it's Allen, South Dakota. And so their latitude further north, very far away from water. And I think they have probably, I want to say one of the biggest, because I haven't looked at every single city, one of the biggest temperature differences on an annual basis, where it's 63 degrees from their average high from the coldest part to the warmest part. Kansas City, a little bit closer to the coast, 55. Birmingham, a little bit closer to the coast,
look at that.
37 degrees.
That is very interesting that you pull that out because that just gives an idea of how big of an influence the Gulf of Mexico is and the latitude. I mean, you think of the direct sunlight, how much shorter the days are, even in Kansas City and in Allen, South Dakota, versus here. So you lose that sun energy, but also, with the Gulf present, we have a southerly flow and we can almost warm up, instantly. But that is a really good talking point and a good explainer for why we can have a lesser temperature swing.
Talked
Great
about,
research, Wes. That's
thanks,
a highlight. That's
thanks.
an honorable mention right there.
Maybe I'll present that whenever if I do this talk to the meteorology class, uh, that ever actually happens. So dibs on that subject.
You got it.
And the reason why, I mean, Where am I going here? Let me back up. So we talked about latitude, prevalence or location to water. And the other thing I try to explain is like here in the Midwest, we just kind of we're in the middle of two air masses. And I always think back to like the super duper simplistic explanation of why tornadoes form. It's like, well, the cold weather comes in from the north and warm weather comes in from the south, and they meet up, and magically a tornado just spins up. It's just like, it's
Just like
not,
that.
yeah, just like amazing.
Same voice.
And it's like, and so I feel like I kind of do a disservice when I say it like that because there's so much more going on. But it's difficult maybe to digest and make that all super explainable because there's the tornado genesis theory and there's a couple different theories of how tornadoes form. But all I have to say is the reason why the Midwest and the Southeast is included in this is because we have the influence of both air masses coming in, and then as air comes off of the Rockies, and this is how we get a lot of our strong storm systems from lee side cyclogenesis, and that's air coming off the Rockies, an area of low pressure forms, it rides the jet stream, and it interacts with the warm and the moisture, and damn, we just have gigantic temperature swings. Evan, how does this setup kind of relate to the southeastern United States?
For us, we've talked about how we have different severe weather seasons here versus you. Now we can have them at the same time of the year, but our setup earlier in the year, so February, March, April, April's kind of our peak for tornadoes. And the reason for that is that time of year, we've got that warm, moist air present, but we also still are early enough to get these shots of cold air. So that we always say that clash in air mass is that cold, dry air on one side hits that warm, moist air from the Gulf, and that collision in and of itself that causes that uplift, right? You got that cold air trying to wedge underneath. We got the moisture, it rises vertically, and then the jet stream as it races across in the mid levels, that causes the air to turn. So we can have the tornadoes and the supercells really from November all the way through May. And that's why our severe weather season is so wide, because that moisture, that warmth from the Gulf is almost always available. There's different intensities of it. But when you have that overlap, that time of year where it's cold and that jet stream comes south and you get a jet streak like that, you just, all the ingredients line up for us to get it. Now, we don't have the lee cyclogenesis where that air sinking off the Rockies. What we do have sometimes is that jet stream will take a big dip over the four corners, and then you'll get this monster low that comes out of the Texas Panhandle, and depending on its track, if we're right near the center of that, boom, we know air's turning, we got that wind shear, and then of course the moisture availability, and it can get rough down here from time to time. We've been very quiet the last year or so I don't want to jinx it, but y'all can have that severe weather.
Well, the trade-off is we have cold weather and tornadoes, and you guys have massive tornadoes that you can't see because there are pine trees everywhere. So
yep, and we get high precip. Most of our tornadoes we get here, people always say they want a storm chase when I go to schools because I'll take our storm chase Jeep. And yeah. I'm like, well, they're like, what's it like to see one? I said, I've seen two in my time chasing here. And the rest have been rain wrapped, and I got to get the heck out of the way because there's a wall of rain. You can't see anything, but right behind it, there's a tornado. So by the time you see it, it's too late. And we just, because of the Gulf, the excess moisture, we don't have that dry, that beautiful aesthetic funnel that you do in the middle of the country.
Beautiful aesthetic. Love it. All right, so this is where Evan and I just pat ourselves in the back here. So good job, buddy. Congratulations, you're forecasting the weather in one of the most difficult cities to forecast the weather in America.
Number one, Kansas City. How does that happen?
Okay, I will say, and I didn't do this analysis, because if I did, I'd put Birmingham at 1 or 2. But so 538 did this analysis, and it's like 10 years old, but it probably still holds true. And they look at like the biggest changes of weather just in general. So how like crazy your weather is. And Rapid City, South Dakota was actually number 1. And that ties in very well with Allen, South Dakota, right? their weather changes so crazily and on such a short time scale that it's one of the most difficult places to forecast. I mean, there's mountains involved, they're far away from water, so it's just a bunch of things coming together to make it super difficult. But
Yeah, the
yeah,
temperature swings, like the dry air too. I mean, imagine having a temperature range going from, like you showed there, -25 to 20 degrees. That's a huge spread in the course of a day, but there's no moisture there, so you get that huge swing, and to nail that high and low, it's tough.
all right. So what they did is they took the most populous cities from that list. So they made a list of like wildest changes in weather, and then took the most populous cities and then made a list. And so whenever people complain to me about how we missed the forecast, I say, you know what, buddy, it's the most difficult place to do in America. Go do it yourself. If you don't like my forecast, go make your own.
Yeah, go, stick your finger up in the air and get you your
Yeah,
own forecast here.
go ask the groundhog what the high is going to be tomorrow, and he'll tell you. Uh, but I mean, I was surprised that maybe Dallas was in here. So number one, Kansas City, Missouri. But I mean, it's whatever. Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas. Oklahoma City, Minneapolis, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Birmingham. Like the fact that St. Louis and Birmingham are so close to one another really surprised me because I mean, St. Louis is 4 hours away.
Yeah.
Birmingham is way, way away.
And I'll say this about Birmingham. It did surprise me when you told me this was on the list, because I feel like, and maybe this is just because I've grown up down here. I grew up in Atlanta. I lived in Starkville for 4.5 years, and then I've been in Alabama ever since. So maybe it's being used to the patterns. But for me, when I saw this list, I could point out why probably several of these are tough to forecast for various reasons. But for Birmingham, I think our biggest challenge comes when there's severe weather, because if we even have a little bit of our parameters are off, say we have a ton of wind shear, but we don't have any instability, basically your fuel to get things going, you can have a completely different, forecast. From a certain time of year, June, July, August, it is 70 in the morning, 90 in the afternoon, chance of storms. So there's a chunk of the year where it's just straightforward convection. But I think where it probably becomes tough, one, this winter weather nonsense, and two, those severe weather setups. And of course, we have remnant hurricanes, tropical systems here too. So we get a little bit of everything.
I mean, I will say one of the things that I struggled with in Atlanta was diurnal or afternoon convection because I feel like sometimes like you generally have like a several hour window when it'll pop up and fall apart, right? But then like sometimes forecasting the movement of them or how or when they'll fall apart, that's something that was really tough for me. That I'm sure by now you figured out. It was the movement thing as well. Like there could be like a storm headed right for Atlanta. They'd be like, oh snap, it's for us, and then it just like decides to fall apart.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what?
I have people reach out to me and they'll be like, "Hey, I'm at this golf course just out of Atlanta. I can see this towering cumulonimbus cloud. Is it going to make it to me?" Well, on some days, there's literally no wind in the middle of the atmosphere. So we use the middle of the atmosphere as our steering winds. And if you don't have any wind there, these things literally pulse up. And as soon as they run out of energy over that, column of air, they fizzle out. And sometimes the outflow, the cold air that comes from that storm collapsing, it'll create a storm 20 miles, 15 miles to the north, south, east, west. They pulse up, and it can be very tough to figure out where they're going to be.
Speaking of tough, this is tough, Evan. And double check my work here.
No, I checked it. I just didn't. I actually screenshotted the climate report from Akron over the weekend. I meant to send it to you, but I was kind of pouting because I was like, man, I'm 0-2 here.
I like how you included a snowfall forecast. I think your snow forecast was good. They
It was,
they
it was close. I think I was a little bit over because they started with rain and then they went to a snow, so the totals weren't quite what I thought it would be. But man, this gives an idea of how hard it is for a forecaster in one city to just jump and randomly pick up elsewhere because you're not used to the patterns and what we typically see. And clearly I did not
that's
grasp
nice.
this one.
Well, I mean, I didn't even forecast the amount of snow. You forecasted an inch of snow, and I was just like rain, snow. But they got a third of an inch. Like no one's gonna be like no one in the Midwest. If you call for an inch of snow and you get a quarter of an inch, no one's gonna like be pissed or like pillage. Like 1 inch of snow is like, okay, whatever. Like that's like nothing.
If you
So
go the other way though, and you're like, we're gonna have a few flurries, and then you get an inch, people might be kind of
I'd be
mad.
like, whoa, whoa, yeah, exactly.
Two
So
nothing.
I'm up to nothing, and I'm picking a city in which none of us have any experience forecasting. San
Okay,
Antonio, Texas.
let's go.
That'll be the next one.
My comeback
Um,
week. Look out.
yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to see the comeback. And I've just had Google Gemini make a random list of cities, and that was the next one on there.
Heck yeah.
Bam,
I
I'll
love
do
it.
it.
So if you're watching this and you lasted all the way, first off, thank you for watching all 40 minutes. That's great. Put a punishment, wheel of punishment, whatever you want to call it, beneath there. And if you think there's something funny you'd like to see us do after the loser, let's give it like 7 weeks or so,
Yeah,
and we'll see. Gives me a chance to come back, but
and me to
pretty great.
lose. Yeah, that'd be good. All right, next week we'll talk about hopefully a warm up, maybe some more wintry weather across the country because we're getting away from the coldest part of the year finally, so it may start to get a little bit warmer across there. But Evan, I got to run, so thanks so much for joining me this week, man.
Heck yeah. It was great to see you guys. Great to see you, Wes. Stay warm over there, and we'll do this again next Monday, right?
So, let's do it. See you then.